In this video, I am going to show and compare the emotional appeals made by two apostles of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Henry B. Eyring and Jeffrey R. Holland, with a third figure that I'm not going to name until the end of the video. There's something that Jonathan Streeter, the thinker of thoughts, calls the partial cry, and it's basically an emotional appeal. It's intentional, and it's designed to generate emotional feelings in the audience, feelings of this person has convictions. They are really emotionally invested in what they are saying. And I just want you to ask how much of this is their personal passion and how much of this is designed, how much of this is contrived in order to elicit a response, an emotional response from the audience.
And what he's doing is he's building up. Um, I guess he's creating the weapon that he's going to use. And when you listen to this, I almost broke out crying when I'm listening to him talk about this because I have a lot of love for my own mom. I think about the sort of stuff that she did for me, and my father died when I was 13, and my mom was left alone, and she went through a great deal of pain, and it was just very difficult so you can see how you can very easily convey emotion by the way that you talk, the way that you pause, the way that you breathe. And if you listen to that section, he's casting a spell by how he talks. He's casting a spell by the way that he pauses. And this is the first time in the talk where he really plays that emotional body language, that emotional vocal language that can be affected. I'm not a very good actor. I tried to do it just now, but people who are really effective at this tend to be the most effective speakers because they connect with their audience. Those are the people then that get elevated to higher positions in the church because people see these people are really spiritual, because that being able to manipulate that type of emotional response is what makes you an effective speaker. And so there's a form of evolution that happens as you get up in the hierarchy. The people who are able to affect a tearful articulation of an emotionally appealing message are going to be seen as the most spiritual, and so they're going to be promoted in the system. And when you think about people like Holland, who gives great speeches, and he uses a lot of literary references, and he uses a lot of very educated, sophisticated prose techniques and everything that that's what his education is in at Yale, and so you expect that. And then you have someone like Eyring, who's able to convey just such intense emotion, seemingly at the drop of a hat. I mean, he cries in almost every single talk. Mm-hmm. And if you pay attention to him, you'll see that he'll have a very tearful paragraph, and then the next paragraph is back to normal again. Right. And so it's very possible, for people to become skilled at doing that. Right. And I just want, as we watch this, just pay attention to the way that he breathes, the way that he talks, because when he talks about critically emotional things, how we feel about our parents, how we feel about our mother, that's when you start to get this kicked in. And he does the same thing when he talks about the Savior.
Mm-hmm. And also they define, it's like a cycle. So they define the traits of spirituality, and then they promote people who fit those traits. And then we see the example, which they basically can, if spirituality is defined in different religious systems differently. In various Eastern religions, it might be to say as little as possible.
Very slowly.
Yeah, or to not even think so highly of yourself that you would stand on a podium and talk to anyone at all. A lot of people live very spiritual lives just going through their life and helping those people they encounter and not really having much to say at all. Other people define spirituality, holy rollers. The louder you are, the more you can shake your body and speak in tongues, that's spirituality. And so, um,
Yeah. So the people who are really adept at that, of conveying the spirituality that fits in the culture, will tend to be elevated within the culture and take more of a prominent position.
yeah, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually more spiritual, or they might be more spiritual, but in that particular kind of spirituality. Again, for some reason, I'm thinking of Corinthians 12. It talks about spiritual gifts and how there are lots of different ones. So Mormonism promotes these very speechifying types of spirituality and getting a little tear in your eye and that sort of thing. But that's not all there is. So,
All right, let's keep going.
With the elegance of that letter echoing in our minds, let me share 3 experiences reflecting the majestic influence of mothers witnessed in my ministry in just the past few weeks.
Okay, there's a little bit of bravado there where he's going to talk about 3 really, emotionally appealing stories, but it's just in the past 3 weeks. And he clearly, this talk he just put together last night. So it gives us kind of an awe of him as an individual, as an apostle, that he's kind of playing to the audience for there. Let's keep.
good point.
My first account is a cautionary one, reminding us that not every maternal effort has a storybook ending, at least not immediately. That reminder stems from my conversation with a beloved friend of more than 50 years who was dying away from the church he knew in his heart to be true.
Okay,
Did he
so
really? No one is, I don't know if he really knew in his heart. There's a
that's the thing is,
protagonist.
how does he
Paul is the
know?
protagonist.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like the narrator of a story who is omniscient.
Mhm.
They're able to tell the inner dialogue of the people, the characters in the story, because they're the narrator of the story. Well, if he's dealing with a man who is apart from the church and didn't join the church, it is very almost insulting for him to then. It's kind of like baptizing Jews who died in the Holocaust. He's co-opting this man's story and using it, reframing it so that it supports the church's
Yeah,
narrative.
and that's pretty typical of deathbed stories. Name a prominent atheist or deist, and they always supposedly recanted on the deathbed. Thomas Paine, apocryphally, was said to have converted to Christianity right on his deathbed. Christopher Hitchens hasn't been gone for 2 or 3 years now, and I've already heard apocryphal stories that he converted, right as he was dying. No, Christopher Hitchens does not convert. Yeah, so it's this sort of unwillingness to listen and to project. We need our worldview to be true so much that he must have known deep down inside that the church was true, because you can't imagine any other way of thinking. So,
All right, let's see where he goes.
No matter how much I tried to comfort him, I could not seem to bring him peace. Finally, he leveled with me. Jeff, he said, however painful it is going to be for me to stand before God, I cannot bear the thought of standing before my mother. The gospel and her children meant everything to her. I have broken her heart, and that is breaking mine.
So I want to talk a little bit about the framework of what he's talking about there. The reason that Mormon mothers who have children who leave the church feel so heartbroken about it is because they are placed in this system where the only value that they are able to see in the choices that their children make are as if they conform to the church's expectations in their lives in terms of obedience and deference and participation. If the church instead had a narrative that was more accepting and inclusive and validating of the individual choices of a person, if they were separate from the church, then her mother would have no reason to have her heart be broken.
yeah, and that's I have some notes I keep looking at here, and what you have in the church is a society where children are seen as extensions of their parents. And it's taught both to the children and to the parents that if the gospel works well for the parents, then it must work well for the children, and the children become indebted to following their parents' journey simply for existing. They aren't allowed to be their own person.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And so, I mean, and again, he's using this emotional delivery where his voice wavers and it's called the almost cry as he's talking. And he does it just as he's talking about, the guy standing before his mother and breaking her heart. And this idea of breaking your mother, it's so universally seen as like this bad thing. So we even sing about it on the playground. We say, "Don't step on a crack or you'll break your mother's back." This way to manipulate people is out there. And so when you start seeing people, it should raise a red flag no matter where you are.
Yeah, and he's also inducing shame here. It's not just guilt in the sense that it's how this person feels in general in his own isolation, but how he feels relative to the people around him, specifically his mother. It's a way of saying, wouldn't your mother be ashamed of you if she knew that you didn't follow in her footsteps? And it's also a really good example of how boundaries get so messed up in LDS culture. I've heard the accusation, that LDS culture is its own thing that sort of must spontaneously grow out of nothing. But no, I can trace these roots back to specific things like this talk. This talk is indicating that there are emotional pressures that you have to submit to for the sake of the emotional comfort of other people, specifically your mother. That I have to sacrifice all of who I am in order for my mother to feel okay about me. And you can't have boundaries in that situation. I can't be my own person in that situation. So.
Right. They look like Mr. Potato Head. He got some ugly kids. We never see that.
Okay, well, that's all I had to say for this gentleman. Oh, bless in his name. Now we've got President Henry B. Eyring. This is so great because now we're
the next one.
Now we're to the second half of the general priesthood session where we hear from the three members of the first presidency in ascending order, from second counselor to first counselor to the president, and we start with the second counselor, President Eyring. And
wait, hold on a second. Is that a pattern? Like, does that happen in every priesthood session?
Yes.
You just blew my mind.
Have you not noticed this before?
No. No, I just thought it was just like random people, and then you go for the big close at the end, the prophet at the end. But
yeah, the first three are random people, but for the second hour, now this is the batting order.
I had no idea. All right, well, I'm learning stuff today. All right,
well, good, because I learned about the X-ray thing, and X-rays don't show pressure on the brain.
Yeah. Timestamp 226 is your first
one. Actually,
what's your setup for this?
I want to skip this.
Oh, okay.
As I said, not that important can skip. This is not that important. It's just mildly interesting. If we had 5 hours, if we were doing a Mormon Stories interview today, we definitely go over that. But and we'll skip the timestamp 353 because we don't need that. But we want to get to this.
Is he crying at any point in this? Am I missing the waterworks? Because I'm missing his waterworks. Okay.
Yeah. You'll be missing a lot of crying as we skip down to 7.40. Doesn't say why he's there or how he came to be there or what's wrong with the girl, but all of a sudden it's just there. And then let me ask you first off, what do you think about the way it's told?
Well, when I heard this story, I was like, I guess President Eyring is trotting out his one miracle again, because if you follow President Eyring's discourses, his various talks, he talks about this girl multiple times, and it always has the same elements. He's in there, he's trying to give the blessing, and the doctors hate him. The doctors are like, well, finish what you're doing, and the doctors are disgusted with him. And sometimes he'll be like, the doctors are angry with me. And other times, like, the doctors are like, just finish what you're going to do, because she's about to die. So there's always that dramatic tension, and so it adds to the story. And then there's always the, he gives her the blessing, and then later, and then pause and cry. Then she walks down. He's able to watch her walk down the aisle at church, months later. And so I don't know. There's these things like when you hear a magic trick, you see a magic trick the first time, you're dazzled, and then you see it again, and it's done a little bit differently, and maybe you catch the guy like putting the card in his sleeve or something, and you're like, oh. Then you see it again, and you're like, there's no magic here. This is just the same trick. I know how it's done. Well, every time he tells this story, I kind of feel that way. I'm like, okay, yeah, exactly. You're doing the thumb trick that you do to a kid, and they see it the first time, they're like, whoa. And then after that, it's like, okay. So I don't know. This story did not really hit me, I'm sure, the way that he wants it to hit people, because it is just him trotting out the miracle story with the miracle healing again. Like, I even have a video on it that I was trying to find while we have it. Okay, yeah, here we have. I'm gonna see if I can cue it up real quick, because it's great to hear him in his. Let's see if this is around 3:23. There's a video that I did on his emotional manipulation. So let me bring it up here. And Yu-Gi-Oh, you gotta chill, dude. All right, I don't have treats.
Doctors were saying, get out of the hospital room.
Okay, here we go.
His father continued to love him, was probably the best example we can imagine.
I agree.
I've had the experience of doing, when it's done that way, of giving a blessing to a little girl. The doctors were saying, get out of the hospital room, she's gonna die. And my companion, I put hands on her head, but we prepared carefully, and I sealed the anointing, and I said, she'll live. Yeah. And the doctors were disgusted, and they walked away, and she did live. I was told she'll walk. Yeah. And the last Sunday I was in that city, that little girl walked down the aisle. And I'm absolutely convinced, if we will prepare, yeah, and really see ourselves as coming to the throne of God, then remarkable things.
Now, the odd thing is, because you were mentioning how in the talk given a general conference,
I ask you, would these men blaspheme before God by continuing to fix their lives, their honor, and their own search for eternal salvation on a book, and by implication a church and a ministry they had fictitiously created out of whole cloth? Never mind that their wives are about to be widows and their children fatherless. Never mind that their little band of followers will yet be houseless, homeless, and friendless, and that their children will leave footprints of blood across frozen rivers and an untamed prairie floor. Never mind that legions will die and other legions live, declaring in the four quarters of this earth that they know the Book of Mormon and the church which it espouses it to be true. Disregard all of that and tell me whether in this hour of death these two men would enter the presence of their eternal judge, quoting from and finding solace in a book which, if not the very word of God, would brand them as impostors and charlatans until the end of time. They would not do that. They were willing to die rather than deny the divine origin and the eternal truthfulness of the Book of Mormon. For
this, that you go into the privacy of your closet. Don't ask your neighbors, your friends, what they think of this. You go see if you can connect with the purest, highest source that you might consider God, and say, what about this? Is this for real? We hope that your thoughts will be of our Father's kingdom. Thank you.
What did his followers experience?
And I knew, my soul knew, that it had what I'd been searching for a long time, and I knew it even before I read it. When I got those statements, I just couldn't stop reading because I knew. And ever since I've been in the class, there's never been a doubt.
Like when I first met them, I knew that what they had to say was true. It wasn't something they said, it was something that I knew inside me. I felt it was like a recognition.
It was instant recognition for me, and there was never a doubt in my mind. I just wish that people out there could understand how much we feel and know this is real. This is not fantasy. I know. I didn't have to believe. I knew.
So, the third person in the video was Marshall Applewhite, the cult leader of Heaven's Gate. And those people said those words shortly before they committed suicide. So, when you watched Marshall Applewhite, you may have thought, oh, this guy's not very compelling. What does he know? That's not a partial cry. You have nothing to go on. Just consider this. It was compelling to those people. And those people are no longer here because they found his words and his emotional appeals compelling. So, I want you to consider how much do your beloved religious leaders intentionally contrive emotional appeals that are designed to stir the emotions of the audience.